Welcome back to the Marvel Movie Minute, a daily podcast in which we explore the films of the Marvel Cinematic Universe 1 minute at a time. In this, our fourth season, we are looking at Kenneth Branagh's 2011 film, Thor. I am Andy Nelson from the Next Reel Film Podcast, once again, flying solo without Matthew, but he will return. Do not fear. Today, we are talking about minute 35, which begins with Jane talking about stars and ends with an empty hospital bed and no sign of Thor. Joining us on the show today, for the last time, sadly, we have Jay Shepard, owner of MCU Location Scout. Welcome, Jay.
Hey, thanks, Andy. Glad to be back.
So we're kind of wrapping up the week here with this last little journey back to the hospital. Any particular element of this whole week that stands out as like the moment for you that's like, oh, I just love this particular part of the movie?
I don't know. The whole, because we're in a setup portion of the film here, so there's a lot of interesting things that are going on that it really hasn't, the film hasn't necessarily taken off by this point, even though we're over half an hour into it. But I like seeing Thor humbled, I guess. I think that's an interesting aspect, and something that Marvel has done with a lot of their characters. It's taken these characters who start off, they're already at a very high echelon, whether they're a arms manufacturer or a god of, thunder or the storm or whatever, or, a brilliant brain surgeon or surgeon.
Right.
And, they get reduced down to something that they feel is beneath them. And so that's always an interesting character journey.
It is. I think they do a great job with that in these films. So we'll be back in just a second to talk more about that in this particular minute. We are an independent podcast from True Story FM. We love producing the show and spending time talking about Thor every day, but it does take time and cost money. Without our members, for whom we are eternally grateful, we couldn't keep it going. Membership means that we can deliver content to you without selling your information and your interests through podcast advertising sources. We like our privacy, and we know you do as well. If you're already a member, thank you so much. If you're not, please consider becoming a member for the season. It only costs $5 per month, or we offer a discounted price if you join at the annual rate. You'll get bonus episodes, early access to shows, access to live streams, stickers, and more. Plus, you get the comfort of knowing that you are supporting this independent podcast production. Visit truestory.fm/Marvel Movie Minute to learn more. Thanks. All right, we are back in Smith Motors, and we have Jane finishing up her sentence. She is saying these are someone else's constellations, which is interesting because I'm assuming she's just assuming that because they don't line up with what she has seen before, so she's just assuming that it's a wormhole, right?
Right, and the fact that again, because of her job and what she does and all the equipment that she has, we could probably assume that her being able to look up at the stars would be like us being able to look at a map of the United States and know, for those that know your geography, what state is what. And if something were to be rearranged, that you would realize that these are not our states or something like that. So like she can look up at the sky and know what's supposed to be there at any particular point.
Now, my question here is, though, like, when would she have been able to get a clean photo of the actual constellations? Because my recollection of a few minutes ago, when the Bifrost opens up, I'm assuming that the moment the constellations are different and we're seeing through the wormhole is when the Bifrost opens and sends somebody through or pulls somebody away. There's so much light in the sky. Like, it has all the swirling kind of clouds up there in the sky. There's the giant rainbow coming down. Like, it seems like, would they be able to tell what constellations are through there?
That's a good point, because this particular scene ends with the close-up of the photo, which is just awash in color and swirls and stuff. There is, and star photography is not one that can really be super blurry and get accurate representations. Well,
I think that's a different. I think that's a different photo, because I think when she and Erik are looking at a photo, that's different than the ones Darcy is printing to kind of hang up on the board. Because those ones are definitely just photos, or maybe they're pulled from the video. I don't know, but of what we see earlier.
Right.
So maybe
right.
she has so much gear on the Pinzgauer. Maybe there are some photos that are, I don't know, would an infrared camera read through light forms in the sky? Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, possibly. Yeah. She may, you're right. She may have other automated instruments that are kind of always looking, so they can get that microsecond between opening and the whatever coming through.
Yeah.
The miasma.
Yeah. Because I would imagine it's a very quick window. It's not like it stays open for 30 seconds or something.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and then, as you pointed out, Darcy does notice something in the printouts that she's been hanging. I don't know. For my money, it's pretty obvious what we're looking at, and it strikes me funny that they've taken so long to figure out. Oh, there's a human figure in this.
Well, and the way that Branagh lines it up in the cut, in the edit between the photo and the hospital bed, the humanoid shape in the photo, or whatever the shape is in the photo, is imprinted directly over the cut of where Thor is then laying down strapped in the bed.
Right.
Right. I think very much like a Hitchcock kind of shot, where he would cut between objects of similar shapes and or elements to drive home some sort of thematic edit.
Yeah, it works great. It's a very it's a fantastic cut, fantastically staged shot of moving into that image on the board to show the body, and then cutting to the hospital room, that kind of that God's eye view looking straight down at Thor strapped to the bed as he is kind of coming to consciousness once again to kind of struggle. It's a great moment. And of course, we're jumping forward a moment, but Jane, obviously she sees that figure, takes the safety goggles off her head, says, I think I left something in the hospital, and they all leave because they basically realize, oh, this wasn't just a drunk wandering around in the desert. This was actually somebody who came down through this. And so this is that moment where they realize we're dealing with something a little bigger.
Right. What I also find interesting about that transitional shot, I know there's a deleted scene that we'll probably talk about the majority of it here in a moment, but the transition moment to that scene is, again, a push in on the bulletin board onto one of these red photos, but it is an entirely different photo, or it may be the same photo, but it is oriented differently.
Correct.
Like they printed it differently because it was going to a shot, or it was going to a new sequence somewhere else, and there was no transition necessary for it. So when they decided, I guess, to make that edit, I feel like they went back in and reshot this close-up to kind of make the edit that we see in the final cut work.
I was thinking that same thing. I was like, they probably did that as in their reshoots. They probably said, you know what, we don't need this extra scene here. Let's cut that, and then let's find a way to transition. Let's redesign, because obviously it's not a real photo. They just jump in, digitally redesign it, move the man shape in the clouds, and print it. And then they probably just timed it, with the position in the frame, so that they'd push into it, and that would time exactly with the push in from that other shot.
Yeah.
It's very effective.
Very cool. It just adds, again, some other little touch to the film that you don't have to have, but it just makes it a little bit more fun.
Yeah.
Interesting, to watch.
Yeah, right. It's great. Well, as we're about to jump into this transition, let's talk about that extended scene real quick, because it would have gone right here. This is a moment back in Asgard. We as we find when we cut to it, we're in one of the top balconies in the palace of Odin's room, and as we see Odin standing there, and Frigga comes in to confront him, very upset that he has sent Thor away. He's banished Thor, sent him to Midgard, and Frigga's just, she's kind of the parent in this scene, and he's kind of the king. What was your take on this particular scene?
Furious.
Yeah, friggin' furious. Yes.
I'm glad I at least get a small moment here to talk about how much I love Anthony Hopkins in this role. His Odin is so. He just is so huge in his role. And when you can just kind of let Hopkins do his own thing and just be out there, I mean, obviously he's drawing from decades of stage training for this. I mean, it feels so Shakespearean with these moments. I just love it. Even though he's in all this armor, he's got the wig and the eye patch on and everything like that. It doesn't seem to bother him as an actor at all. He's going for it, and fills the entire frame.
Oh, he's so much presence. And I mean, he's talked about how, he was at a point in his career where he kind of, wasn't sure what was left. And when Branagh wanted him on board, he said Branagh pushed him to do things that he hadn't, really done. And it just gave him like this new breath of excitement about acting again. And I think that speaks to him kind of like finding that fresh take. Because, I mean, wow. I mean, he's done a lot of amazing performances in the last decade. And then also just to Branagh as a director, especially like this Shakespearean director coming in to do a superhero film.
Mm-hmm. I'm also always amazed every time I watch the Thor films at how non-distracting Rene Russo's English accent is. Like it's very subtle, I guess, or it's non-distracting. There are some times when American actors take on an accent, and you may know that they are doing an accent, but this just it doesn't seem to bother me the way some other people would do. And of course, British actors do American accents all the time, and there's sometimes like I didn't even know like Christian Bale was British.
He's flawless with his. Well, Chris Hemsworth in this film. I mean, he's kind of doing a Asgardian accent, we'll call it, but I never pick up Australian.
Yeah, that's true. So,
yeah, no, it's impressive, and I think Rene Russo does a great job here. And I guess that's where we can kind of, if we have a hard time buying it, we're like, well, it's not really British; it's Asgardian.
Right. That is true, but she is trying to match some of the cadence and stuff that Hopkins puts out there.
Sure,
so, obviously, I don't think he was doing anything other than his voice.
I don't think so. Yeah, this is one scene, and again, another reason I'm glad they cut it. And I guess I didn't pay attention to it as much, but this is because we see the two of them kind of interacting so much in this moment. I really feel like I noticed there's like a 17-year age difference between Rene Russo and Anthony Hopkins. And I mean, maybe it's just because his hair seems so white and lustrous in this particular moment, but it is one of those moments.
Well, that's where Thor gets his hair from, I guess, from the dad's side.
Right. Exactly. And so a couple other things that we've talked about on the show when Odin is stripping Thor of his rank and his title, he pulls some of his discs off, and that was, our sense of that. And Branagh referenced the life of Emile Zola and the Dreyfus affair as kind of a reference point for kind of a military stripping of the armor. And we thought it was interesting that I guess they're saying that these discs are actually part of the rank. And what's interesting is Thor has 6 discs on his armor front, and Odin, as we see here, he only has 4. And so I don't know what that would say about the ranking, but I guess it's just an element of ranking, but not necessarily kind of like defining like what level you are or something.
Right, because I think trying to nail anything like that down, it's like people looking into more military sci-fi movies and trying to, make something out of a costume designer's choice. Obviously the 6 discs on Thor's armor very much just represent the 6 blue circles that they always drew on his chest plate in the comic books.
Exactly.
Which I think it's a great design style that they were able to adapt elements from the comics, but without making it look comic booky. It all of the stuff that the MCU has done, and a lot of the recent DC films as well, and TV shows, they are adapting these spandex costumes that are outrageous and would never play as such directly from comic to screen. So they take those elements, kind of like they did in the X-Men movie, where they had the leather outfits, which I still am not super crazy about, but they had the highlighted yellow piping on them to help, or blue piping, I guess, on some characters to indicate the coloring from their actual costumes from the comic books.
Well, and then they also use them as jokes too, because isn't it in the first one where when they're flying around, they're like, "What were these?" And it was like they hold up the old costumes. They're like, "Oh, that's what we used to wear," or something like that. Like they find ways to play with that too.
Yeah,
which is kind of
fun. And there, Wolverine had opened up a chest at some point, and his old armor was in it, or his old yellow helmet was in it.
Right.
So.
Yeah, those are always fun little nods.
Yeah, much like WandaVision, where they put the characters in their comic accurate style costumes.
Right.
So real fun stuff like that.
Yeah, absolutely. The other little note that I have here that's interesting is Odin says, he pushed us to the brink of war. I don't know. This is a point of contention that we've been debating about, like the way that that Laufey seems to see it is that Thor pushed them into war, not to the brink of war.
Right.
And but then Odin kind of takes everyone and leaves. And then Laufey, he says that, your son started this and, we're not going to back down, is basically kind of his attitude. Odin and all of them leave. And then Laufey just kind of sits around, and we just kind of decided, well, maybe it was just the brink of war. Maybe it's just Odin, or maybe it's Laufey just playing good for his troops and just shaking his fist at him. I'll get you next time, sort of thing. Yeah, exactly.
Kind of stuff, yeah.
Exactly.
Well, Odin, as we learn later, I mean, is the last one to point fingers and call names at anybody. I mean, he's like the worst of them all.
Yeah, absolutely.
As you get into Ragnarok and everything like that. But, it's kind of going back to the metaphor of, the stern father trying to do what's best for the kid, but also saving face, because, I mean, this is not just a normal sort of family, right? This is a political family. This is a very public family. And, the things that your kids do in private, in families that are not public, like it's embarrassing, but, it's not that bad. But of course, in a situation like this, it can lead to international incidents between the realms.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, it can be very serious. And so it's one of those things where I feel like, I don't know, but part of me is like, I wonder if Odin and Laufey they totally see the situation differently. Like that may just be the place that they're at, right? Laufey's ready for war. Odin's like, we're close, but we're not quite there. Next time I come down to Jotunheim, we'll talk about it some more once you've cooled down, sort of thing.
Yeah.
Who knows?
Cross giant joke. Yeah, I get it.
See? And then we have another reference to mortals here, where Frigga says, abandon him amongst the mortals. And so I thought that was interesting, because, we're always debating, do they just live a really long time, or are they actually immortal? Or do they kind of call themselves immortal just because they live for so long?
I think it's more that.
Yeah.
It's also kind of strange, because when you look at all the 9 realms, like I was saying a few days ago, Earth, Midgard, is like the bastard ninth realm. It's like all these other realms are like, they've got magic and technology and aliens and all of this crazy stuff, and giants and monsters and rock creatures and stuff like that. And then there's Earth.
So right.
It's like, how did we get lumped in with all these other realms? What, I don't know.
Right. So many,
it's weird.
There's so many much bigger things, and then there's us. Right.
Right. Earth is very much Tatooine of this. Everything, like, we are the center. Galactus wants to come here. This is where all the Thanos wants to come here and take over. So
right.
We're much more important than we deserve to be.
Clearly, it's funny. It just it ties back to the old ways of thinking. Well, everything revolves around us.
Yeah.
Very
Copernican.
Exactly. Well, so as far as deleted scenes go, it's like, I can see why they cut it. I don't really care for it. I mean, sure, Odin says Thor's fate is in his own hands now. we kind of already knew that. I can see why they cut this. We're just not getting anything new out of this scene.
It does go back to Asgard just to remind us that there is something else going on, because we do go for quite a while here, and I think they were maybe thinking, well, hey, we don't want people to forget that, what's going on back home.
Right.
But as with kind of any hero's journey, we've now followed our hero here. We need to stick with him here.
Yeah. We'll get back to...
I think that's... Cooler heads prevailed on that.
Exactly. So then, as you pointed out, we have this fantastic kind of God's eye view looking at Thor, who wakes up strapped to a bed, and it's a great shot. And one of my favorite things about it is that at the kind of the opposite side of the room here, from him, we see some red Crocs kind of under the chair, and I feel like that's a great little nod to kind of throw something red into here, just to kind of like give us a nod to his cape, which he has had torn from his body. But
wow, that's a good catch. I have not noticed those before.
I assume that they're meant to be kind of hospital shoes, that sort of thing.
Yeah,
but it's just
usually
a great
they
little
give me
thing.
Socks
Right.
Anytime I go in. But
I know, when do they throw Crocs at you? Never had that happen.
Well, yeah, that's pretty cool. Well, I mean, I guess when you go to the county hospital, like I'm only going to my local city hospital.
Maybe that's why.
Yeah.
So Thor wakes up. I just love this look that Hemsworth gives. It's just such a great confused look, and it's not possible. Like, he plays this so well. This is why I love Chris Hemsworth in the role, because he handles all of this sort of stuff of like being this over the top, all powerful God, and like demoted to human ranking, and just so confused by it. Like, I just love the way he plays all of this. And it's
the macho surfer jock dude from the 80s films that is stuck in the summer class with all the nerds, and he cannot believe what is going on. So
that's right.
The thing that also gets hammered home in this shot, as we sort of, like you said, started at this God's eye view, which is a really apt way to put it, and we sort of drift down towards him. I started the week talking about this. I'm going to go back to his eyebrows again. They are so bleached out. It actually looks like he doesn't have eyebrows as we are coming in on them, just because they blow out with the lighting.
Yeah, they disappear.
And I'm sorry. It's so distracting. I want a special edition of Thor to come out. I'm not one for having directors going back and messing with their films. I mean, I understand if they're not happy with it, but you need to have the original version of your film, like, at least live in some fashion, or give people a choice.
Yeah,
not just make this special version the new version. But they need to go back and they need to kind of recolor those eyebrows digitally. Just do some digital grading, just a little touch up. It would make all the difference. And then you could resell the box sets again. I'm telling Marvel Studios, they could make a ton of money on this.
Hashtag the eyebrow cut. Give it to us, Kevin. We want it. The fans are clamoring for it. Oh, I'm 100% in agreement with that. It is so distracting. Like, through this entire film, I constantly have to keep telling myself, stop staring at the eyebrows. Stop staring at the eyebrows. Pay attention to the story.
Yeah.
And it makes sense. I mean, Feige said, if there, of all of the films, when I can't remember when he was asked this, but he said the only choice that I made in all of this that I wish that I could undo is bleaching Chris Hemsworth's eyebrows.
And, they went against, look for numbers of characters. I mean, Robert Downey Jr. does look like different aspects of Tony Stark as he's been drawn. But, of course, once he was cast, then all renditions of Tony Stark look like Robert Downey Jr.
Right.
Now, of course, you went the opposite way with Sam Jackson, where the Ultimate Universe drew Nick Fury as a black man that looked like Sam Jackson, and then they actually cast him in that. So for them to make this weird choice that, well, Thor is super blonde in the comics, and because he's Scandinavian, and we've got this guy from Australia and stuff. I mean, just think what would have happened if if Hiddleston had actually been cast as Thor. Would it have been a wig? Would they have just dyed his hair?
Yeah, right. Well,
I shudder to think what would have happened there, because then who would have played Loki? And that would have
right.
been...
That's not the what if we want.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, Thor is strapped down into the bed. He has a yellow wristband on. Now, according to hospital wristband color coding, that is actually for fall risks. And so I'm not exactly sure it's the right one that they have on him. But then again, I looked at like the different color codes. I'm like, well, none of them really fit. I guess it would just be a white wristband, if anything. I tried reading some of normal modern wristbands have barcodes on them. I didn't see a barcode. There's a ton of numbers. I couldn't figure out what any of the coding was. The only thing that's clear on the wristband is it does say XXX, Thor. So that's first name, unknown last name. It does say M38. So I don't know. I mean, they're assuming they know he's a man, but are they assuming he's 38? I don't know what that's for. And then possibly a doctor's name. It looks like a Zepfel, D.
Yeah.
Dr.
And some
Zepfel.
other numbers there after his age. And I guess it could be a 38, but could be a 36 too.
Yeah, right. But something in the 30s, which also seems like they're overestimating his age. I mean, or underestimating, technically, if he's an Asgardian who's hundreds of years old.
Yeah, that's true. He's like, oh, you think I look that young? Oh, that's nice.
That's how sweet of you, right. Well, that's probably gives them the clue. Oh, this must be Midgard. What I love about this moment, though, is he's fighting so hard to get out of these straps, and he can't because he doesn't have the powers of Thor. What I love, though, is he ends up slipping his hand out, and this actually seems like a very Loki-like maneuver, wouldn't you say? Like, this is he taking cues from his brother here of kind of slipping his hand out?
Yeah, I guess it probably would be something new for him, because up to this point, he would be able to use his strength to pretty much get him out of any situation.
Yeah.
But when the strength fails him, he then has to resort to, something else. And that is, I never really kind of put it together that way, but that is something he might have then thought about as he was trying to wiggle his way out of there. He's like, oh, what would Loki do in a situation like this?
WWLD.
Yeah.
It's a great moment, and of course, then we will have to figure out later what happens to him, because now we're back. We're actually outside of the. Tell me the name of the building again. It's the Tony Anaya building in Santa Fe, New Mexico. Right. And so we're outside of that as we see Jane and Erik arriving. Darcy's following behind, and they run in because now they are after this person that came down from the sky. And what I love about this next moment when we cut inside is they actually pass the window to that triage bay that we had seen earlier. And inside, we see people repairing all the damage that had been done. We see Nurse Terry and Nurse Ron talking with a security officer about what had happened. And they realize, oh, crap, our little person has created quite a problem here.
Yeah, that's the thing you don't want, because now, of course, people are going to notice if he goes missing.
Yeah,
even more than they might have before, because hey, where'd the big 6 foot, muscular blonde dude go to?
Exactly. And Erik clearly realizes that this was Thor, because he instantly speeds up and starts moving through the hallway that much faster to figure out we got to get this guy and scoot out of here as quick as we can. And of course, that's when we get to the room, find it empty. Great camera moves through this with Steadicam and booms. As we reveal that the bed is empty, we've got the little wrist straps kind of swinging by the sides there, and that's where the minute ends.
What's going to happen?
Such a cliffhanger for this week. Yeah. It's a lot of fun stuff has happened this week. I mean, any last things about this particular minute that you want to talk about?
Again, I really like that editing transition. You don't see a lot of choices like that consciously made. I think Kenneth Branagh, I've been a fan of his films that he's directed, going back, a couple decades here.
Sure.
So it's definitely something within the realm that I would see him do. But making films is such a hectic thing that unless you are thinking about a lot of this stuff in advance, to kind of be able to set that up. And I thought your point that maybe this was something that they added in reshoots. They obviously had the God's eye view kind of thing set up, and they found an easy way to make that transition. But I think there's some other transitions here, in the film as well that kind of speak to that slightly more artistic ability and just those kind of things that Branagh brings out. And he's not afraid to have his characters go broad. Because this is supposed to be kind of an epic story, but also, he then has those moments where he can bring the camera in and, get a little more intimate, like in the Smith Motors section there.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it speaks to Stanley Kubrick. Actually, he kind of broke down a list of things that he felt were most important in putting a film together. And number 4 was actually story. And then number 3 was character. Number 2 was context. And number 1 for him was transitions. And I think that's really interesting, is like how you get from one thing to another is so cinematic. There's such an important element of that in context of the story. And so I think that's interesting.
Yeah, because the things that you can do in film, you can't do in a book, that you can't do in a comic.
Right.
Is those transitions. It's the edit. It's the putting an image where another image just was.
Yeah.
And the way that we've all come to realize, well, we're cutting in between the same location or we're going somewhere entirely new. And how do you do that? And right, there's nothing else like that, because you can't, it doesn't mirror anything about reality, because we all live in a continuous oneer.
Yep.
Exactly. There is no edit. Kind of sleeping is an edit, I guess.
I suppose,
because, you go to sleep and you wake up and you're in the same place. So
yeah, right. Well, I mean, it's been a fantastic week talking with you about these 5 minutes. So much juicy material in here. It was just a thrill.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Last time, do you want to plug all of the wonderful places that people can find you and learn more about everything you're up to?
Absolutely. If you are into the Marvel Cinematic Universe, please check out MCULocationScout.com, where I try to find locations from all the various MCU films, TV shows, and the like. We're pretty much caught up with everything there. As soon as I'm looking forward to Hawkeye, because as soon as that starts coming out, putting that stuff in there as well on a weekly basis, which gets a little challenging sometimes. And for everything else I'm working on, you can go to retrozap.com. And you can find my podcasts there. I've got Superhero Suite, about everything about superheroes, talking about different movies, TV shows, comics, characters, all sorts of fun stuff that comes out on a bi-weekly basis, twice a month. And on months that have a 5th week, a 5th Thursday, we do special commentaries on movies. The last one we just did was the Fantastic Four for their 60th anniversary back in September. So that's fun. Also got Scarlet Velocity, a Flash podcast, which is an after show for the CW TV series, which we've been doing for 7 years there. And we've also got Enjoy Stuff, which is a show about finding the fun in everything, looking at pop culture kind of throughout the years. And then I've also got articles about film, about sci-fi films called Sci-Fi Saturdays. And you can also find some MCU Location Scout articles that I write at retrozap.com, kind of expanding on some of the elements from MCULocationscout.com. And then in October, I'd also done a 31 Days of Horror, so a daily look at horror films, which is always fun.
Fantastic. There's so much good stuff to dig around in there. So check all that out and see what Jay is up to, everybody. As for me, as Matthew would say, thanks all of you for your support. Have a good day. And as I would say, until next time, true believers.
Marvel Movie Minute is a production of True Story FM, engineering by Andy Nelson. This season's music is One Last Ride by Martin Puringer. Find the show at truestory.fm, and if your podcast app allows ratings and reviews, consider doing that for the show.